In this video, we will discuss some basic concepts of software. Broadly, we can break down the parts of a computer into two categories. Hardware, you hold it in your hand. It consumes electricity. It stores things. It computes things. It presents things to you. It accepts input and output. It's essentially worthless without any software. These days, it's often emulated in software as well. You may be using a computer in the cloud or even on your desktop that does not exist except completely emulated through software. Software, the other category, consists of instructions for the hardware to perform, data for the hardware to operate on, and it is typically stored in some type of hardware or it's transmitted. All software is represented in binary, base 2. It consists of long, interminable, unintelligible strings of ones and zeros, typically divided into bytes. But in the case of a movie or a video, the concept of a byte doesn't mean a whole lot. Now, humans have a difficult time with binary because it is difficult for our brains to comprehend. One, because it's so long, and two, because we didn't grow up with it. We grew up with base 10 because we have 10 fingers and 10 toes, and it was easier to count using increments of 10. But software is easier to store using ones and zeros because really the only thing the hardware can do is identify whether a bit, a binary digit, is a 1 or 0. Logically true, logically false. So at the computer level, binary is terrific. At the human level, not so much. Everything in the machine, regardless of what it is when it appears on your screen or in your speakers, is represented in ones and zeros. Not a big problem for the end user. They don't care. For us, a fascinating topic. Software must exist somewhere. It has to be stored when it's not being transmitted. And here are some ways that it can be stored. I got very extreme, from DVDs through RAM, all the way down to, yes, a piece of paper or even a paper tape in some environments can be used to store that software. Probably the only thing we need hardware for these days, and I'm being a little facetious, is to transmit or store the software. We can't use software to transmit other software. So we need a fiber optic cable, a network card eventually, or some type of transmitter receiver to get that software between pieces of hardware. Broadly speaking, again, there are two types of software: executable and non-executable, or if you wish, code and data. Now, inside the executable category, there are two broad types of software: application programs, application software, and system software. The lines aren't always clear, but we'll do our best to define them in these general terms. System software you aren't supposed to see. It is supposed to be the interface, the connection between you, your programs, and the hardware. In the strictest sense, then, an operating system connects you and your programs to the hard drive, to the keyboard, to the monitor. And that allows us some level of flexibility because we can take a program and move it between hardware platforms as long as the operating system knows how to talk to that hardware. I've listed some popular operating systems here. I encourage you to take a peek at those online. I'm not going to get into a political discussion or a debate over which one is better than the other. I am a big fan of Linux, or Linux if you prefer. I'm a big fan of QNX, which is a real-time multitasking multi-user operating system, whereas Windows and Linux are not real-time. And I know that there are a lot of people who swear by Macintosh operating systems, whatever version they're on now. I have no idea. I freely admit that. I'm sorry, I'm not a Windows bigot. I'm just not interested in what Macs are doing. Now, there is some gray area between system software and application software, especially these days. Here I've given you a kind of extreme example. This is the Microsoft Solitaire collection. I think comes with Windows because I didn't install it on purpose. Is this part of the operating system? Well, it installed with the operating system, but I think most people would agree that if I never had Solitaire on my machine, I think my operating system would probably run just fine. But there may be some components of this program that the OS also uses, so there may be some shared libraries or shared functionality. So if I ripped out Microsoft Solitaire collection, I might also be ripping out something that Windows needs to function properly. Is it part of the OS? Well, the debate goes on. I'll leave that up to you to decide. Is this part of the OS? This is Microsoft Internet Explorer, a browser. Most of us use a browser every day. We might use Chrome, Safari, Firefox. We might use Tor. We might use Brave. There are many different browsers out there. This one installs with Windows. When you install Windows on your computer, you get this browser. And I suspect when you install a Apple operating system on an Apple machine, you get some browser, probably, Safari? Is that part of the operating system? Again, if I rip out Internet Explorer, if I go to the trouble of uninstalling it, might I be uninstalling things that Windows also needs to function properly? In this class, I am not going to hold you responsible for identifying what components of what software are part of the system software or part of the application software or both. I merely want to introduce you to the concepts, and I want you to recognize that there are some gray areas, and it's not as easy as simply saying this is Windows or this is not Windows. Here's a dramatic example. In 2009, the European Union sued Microsoft because the European Union realized that when a user installed Windows, they got by default, if they took no action, Internet Explorer as their default browser. Now, those of us who are experienced in IT a little bit understand that it's easy to change the default browser by simply downloading Chrome or Firefox or Tor or Brave or whatever. But the European Union was concerned about people who did not have that level of expertise, and they felt that Microsoft had an unfair advantage because Microsoft got to decide what the default browser was on the installation of the operating system. Again, I would ask you to think about the question, is the browser part of the operating system? After lawsuits and trials and lawyers making lots of money, Microsoft settled and agreed to provide a browser dashboard at installation to allow users to choose from 12 different browsers. and I doubt that any of us could name 12 browsers. But there are a lot of third-party browsers out there, and that's what Microsoft had to do. And I believe that this agreement with the EU has expired, and I don't think it is enforced anymore. But you can see that there are a lot of people interested in what might be part of the OS, what be part of the application or system software, and what might not be. Application software, kind of the opposite of system software, is written for end users to use. It is written to accomplish a particular task on top of the OS, on top of the system software. A common example would be a word processor, a game, a spreadsheet, an accounting program, even utilities that might do things that are system related still could be considered application software because they're not part of the operating system. How do we get software and what does it cost? Well, another debate rages here that I'd like to talk about. Some software is free. Some software is certainly not free. Windows is not free to most people. Typically, in most environments, the vendor of the software gets to decide what the software costs or doesn't cost. Therein rages the debate. In the category of free software, there are even subcategories. So some things are kind of free and some things are even more free and some things are even more free. There is a category called shareware, of course. There is an entire industry of licensing and nuance deciding what actually defines free software, and we'll get into this a little bit. Free software can come from, as you probably know, many different sources. Download.com still exists. I, be honest, haven't gone there in a long time. I've put some software on download.com and people have downloaded it. I don't use it anymore, but it's still there. Here's download.com, and here is my contribution. I think I may have others too, but this is the one that I usually show to people. I wrote a program a long time ago that created math tests for elementary school students because my daughter brought home a practice test and it was the only one they had. It was 100 math problems on a piece of paper and that's it. So I decided that, hey, I could write a program to generate unique practice tests for all these little elementary school students to learn their arithmetic. And I put it on download.com and I told the parents about it. And it didn't get wildly popular, but some people downloaded it and it got voted a little bit. So you may want to take a look at that and get a good chuckle. There are some funny comments that people left at the bottom of this screen. And the program is still there. You can see that it was originally spec'd for Windows 2000. That's certainly been quite a while. But if you download it and run it and get it to work, I will give you extra credit. So take that as you wish. Another software repository is GNU. We'll talk about that in a moment. Another software repository is YouTube. I'm using it to make a point that videos and music is software. YouTube will let you watch a video, listen to a song for free. That's considered software. That is kind of free. Now, I will tell you in a moment, you're going to learn that people disagree radically over the definition of free. And that is something that is interesting to study and talk about. There is the concept of open source software, meaning that, and again, I'm generalizing because there are organizations that will even debate the definition of open source. Generally, open source means you can have the programming source code behind the application or system program that you want to use. WordPress, a significant number of websites run WordPress software. Very, very large number. WordPress is open source. You can download it. You can make changes to it. You can use it for free. Linux or Linux, open source. The source code is freely available. The programming is freely available. You can download it, make changes to it, have your own version of Linux. You can call it after your cat, and you can get wildly popular by giving it to other people. Apache has become a wide suite of system programs, one of which probably that got them started was their web hosting software. So you can write a website in WordPress and host it with Apache, and you are essentially paying nothing for the software that you're using to run that website and host that website. PHP is a wildly popular programming language that is actually used to program WordPress. Those two go together quite often. Python, another wildly popular programming language. And then the .NET Core, which is a Microsoft library of programming functionality that was released recently by Microsoft, so you can develop .NET applications on Linux platforms. You don't have to use Windows to use the .NET Core set of libraries. And I will tell you right now that there is a wild debate over whether these are all open source or not, depending on the definition of open source that you use. If you like a good soap opera, these are some interesting things to read about. Another category of software, trialware, Plants vs. Zombies. You download it, you can play it for a while. I think it's time limited. I'm not sure. It's been a while since I played Plants vs. Zombies. I used to love that game. Microsoft Office had a trialware version. They may not today. Who knows? They may tomorrow. It's hard to keep up. But another way of distributing software that lets the end user try it before they buy it and then decide if they'd like to make a purchase. And of course, retail software. We've all probably paid for something over time. iTunes costs money. That's software. If you go to Best Buy and pay for something, that's retail software certainly. And then if you pay for a Justin Bieber song, which we will leave that to stand on its own merits. Some people don't think you should pay for software, and they will go to the extent of stealing it. It is vociferously protected by different organizations. The RIAA works to protect songs. The SBA works to protect mostly system and application software programs. And another faction works to pirate those things. We will not get into the ethics of pirating, the morals of that right now. That is a topic for another day. Digital rights management, the SBA, the RIAA are actively advocating adding little bits of software and control to these programs that you obtain so that you cannot copy them. And on the other side of the fence, there are hackers and programmers actively working to defeat DRM. So it's an ongoing battle between the two parties. Again, you decide. Have an opinion. Is DRM a good idea? If you buy a copy of Windows, should you have to activate it with a code, or should it just work for free? Is DRM an intention to make something defective? Visit Defective by Design, as I've linked on this slide, and read about their point of view. They are very, very upset with Sony and Google and Netflix and Microsoft and Amazon because those companies do not let you download and freely distribute the software that they make available. There is an entire school of thought that software should be free. Open source, as we said, open source is software that comes with the programming source code and provides an opportunity for you to learn the algorithms and the logic in that source code and make changes to it if you like, and distribute it after you make those changes. So open source is a flavor of free software. It's probably one of the most free softwares. Remember as we go through this that the definition of free software is in dispute. So GNU has their definition. The FSF, which we'll get to, has their definition. You probably have your definition. So none of these things are cut and dried. I want you to have an opinion. I want you to look and read and think when your employer asks you, when your friends ask you when you're standing in line at Chick-fil-A, should I pirate something? Have an opinion. The FSF, very well worth your time to spend a little bit of time browsing their site, read about why they think software should be free, and think if you agree with them. Do you think that someone should be allowed to take the hard work of someone else, make a modification to it, and distribute it as their own, or even sell it as their own? You decide what you think, and you develop your own opinion on that. The FSF has a manifesto, generally kind of a scary word. FSF will campaign against non-open source software. They will take on Apple, they will take on Microsoft, and they will try to change the minds of people on the internet. Now, do you think Guardians of the Galaxy should be free, or do you think it should cost $29.99 or whatever the DVD goes for? You decide. Have an opinion. FSF breaks down their position into 4 essential freedoms. And I'm spending a lot of time on this because it's important. It's part of what we do. It's part of the way we acquire software, how we decide whether to use it or not, and how we distribute it. So take the time to delve into this topic, and it's well worth your time. Let's look at the 4 freedoms briefly. Freedom 1, the freedom to run the program as you wish for any purpose. And you can probably think of a piece of software that comes with a license that says you can do this, this, and this, but you can't do this. FSF disagrees with that. Freedom 2, the freedom to study how the program works and change it so it does your computing as you wish. And then the addendum is access to the source code is a precondition for this. Again, one of their freedoms then is that you get the source code for whatever program you buy, whether it's Windows, whether it's OS X, whether it is a game. Would you like the source code for Plants vs. Zombies? That might be kind of interesting. Now, the freedom to study how a program works brings up the topic of something called reverse engineering. Now, that is generally considered to be illegal in a lot of cases, a violation of a license. The FSF opposes that illegality and asserts that you should be able to take it apart and do whatever you like with it. The third freedom, the freedom to redistribute copies so you can help others. Here we go. You bought a copy of Windows, you bought a copy of Guardians. The FSF asserts you should be able to give those away or sell those copies. The fourth freedom, the freedom to distribute copies of your modified version to others. You've taken the source code for Windows and you've made it work a little bit better. You found some bugs, you fixed them, you added some enhancements, you programmed a new version of Solitaire that gives you a pizza if you win the game. According to the FSF, you should be able to give that away. Your job is to have an opinion. I'm not judging your opinion. I'm not telling you my opinion. I want you to think. I want you to be able to talk about this intelligently after doing some online research. Should all software be free? Should Guardians of the Galaxy be free? Should Windows be free? Should Plants vs. Zombies be free? If you buy a copy, should you be legally permitted to give it away? You decide. All I want from you is a considered, thoughtful opinion that you can defend. Now, I am not going to tell you my opinion because I don't want to bias your thinking. If you'd like to meet me at Chipotle and over a burrito discuss with me the nuances of free software, I would be happy to do that. But I will not tell you what my opinion is because I want you to think for yourself. Thank you.